What's up, y'all? This is TJ over here at Fake It or Make It. Today's video is going to kind of chronicle me getting back to my roots growing a garden. No pun intended. Well, maybe a little bit. But as a kid, I grew up on the farm, and we had a garden, we had animals. Everything that we did on a daily basis was to fundamentally provide for ourselves to keep from having to go to town and buy the things that we could produce right there on the farm. Now, you couldn't just absolutely produce everything, dishwashing soap, some seasonings, things of that nature. But for the most part, if you could grow it or produce it or raise it, it was something that we did. And I wouldn't trade that way of life coming up for the world. And as I got older, I kind of moved away from that lifestyle, and I wish I would have stuck with it, because now I'm having to relearn all the things that I was taught as I was growing up, which that's not a bad thing. I really love to learn and practice things. So growing a garden has been really a fun experience for me and my wife so far, and she's really into it. So it's just really exciting that this is something that we can do together and build a relationship around working with our hands and working the soil and raising something from a seed. You just can't beat that. It's just a really amazing experience. When I was younger, my grandparents didn't use these fancy raised bed garden systems. We put the vegetables and the seeds directly into the ground in these large tracts of land, and we relied heavily on nature to provide the sunlight and the amount of water that the plants needed to grow. I mean, we made our own compost and stuff like that, but for the most part, everything went in the ground. And what I'm doing here with these Vego Garden Bed systems is just trying to really control every aspect, and on a small scale, just produce enough for me and my family to live on. It's been a while since I cranked my Franken tractor, so you can see how excited I was for it to crank right on the first key turn. So that was a really good, heartwarming moment. This little tractor was given to me, and it was in the worst shape, and I wish I would have recorded everything that I had to do to get it running. And it was a lot. It would have made for a cool video, although the video would have been probably 2 months long. But this little tractor has been a huge lifesaver for me on my place. This mound of stuff that you see me scooping up right here is old burn pile ashes that I've been collecting for the last 15 years. And the only problem with this stuff is that the old burn pile has a lot of nails and metal stuff in it from boards that I recovered from my house and threw away over the years remodeling. So it's not something I wish I would have thought about removing the nails, but at some point I got too tired to handle all that and pull all the metal out. So we just had to keep in mind that we didn't want to run our hands through this soil too much, and we just made sure that whatever we seen, we made sure that we picked it out by hand. But this stuff is going to be really rich and really good for the soil. And I used it mostly just for a filler to fill these 17-inch raised beds up. And then we went to the local nursery and bought some good gardening soil to put on top, so that we didn't really have to mess with, any nails or trash that was in the stuff on the bottom. But you can see here, Shanna's kind of smoothing it out and looking through there and just picking up anything that she sees right on the top. After getting the Vego raised bed gardens up and running and got them filled up with dirt and got all the nuts and bolts tightened up, I had some leftover landscaping timbers that I wanted to use to make another raised bed so that we can kind of expand our growing capacity. And right here, I'm just starting to build the water drip system that I'm going to use for all the beds. Now, this can kind of get to be a pain when you're putting this stuff together. You just have to really think about how you can put your drip system together in such a way that it doesn't look terrible. And in the past, my gardens have just been thrown together, so I really wanted this stuff to look good, and I spent the money to get the proper fittings to put the drip line system in, and eventually I will be able to kind of change things around and add more lines to it as I get more raised garden beds. Next year we hope to get another few of these Vego garden bed systems, because you can put them together in all sorts of different ways, and they're just really cool, and they'll last. I think the lifespan is about 10 or 12 years, and you can pressure wash the outside of them and clean them up, and they're just really neat system. But you definitely want to make sure that you have an adequate water supply, so that you can keep the soil moist, as the raised beds lose a lot of moisture in it, and you want to make sure that you can definitely water all the way down to the bottom so that your root systems will stay deep. And also, they say that spraying and using a sprinkling system or a misting system for the garden can spread disease. And so I had the kit already, so I thought it would be cool to use this dripping system. And you can see right here, it's dripping some water nicely. We leave these dripping systems on for, I don't know, probably a couple of hours in the evening. And you can go out and check and look around the bottom of these garden beds, and the water has made it all the way down to the bottom and saturated even the ground around the bottom of the raised bed. After getting finished with the raised beds, I really wanted to do some rows of corn, because I love fresh raised corn. But I needed to go to my dad's house, borrow the tiller, and come back. But it was definitely worth the trouble of going and getting the tiller, because this soil is just really good and rich soil. And whenever I turned over the top layer, all that white powdery stuff just turned black, and it was just some really nice soft fluffy soil down below the surface. So I'm really excited about this little patch of earth that I have turned up here. And I just went back and forth with the tiller several times, breaking it up and cutting any roots that I found out, and making sure that they wouldn't interfere with my rows. After I thoroughly tilled up this little patch of earth, I went around with my garden rake and smoothed out the whole surface and made sure there was an even depth of turned soil just spread all across this patch. And I came back and created rows with the garden rake, just pulling equally spaced rows going long ways with the way that I tilled, and just kind of lightly packed it and made sure that there was enough soil for the corn to set in and for the water to run off and just kind of drain out and not just sit on top of them. All in all, I ended up with 5 rows for corn, and on the last row, about halfway down, I saved that half a row for some beans, snap beans that grow into a bush, just so that I wouldn't have to try and cut any bean poles and grow them in the vine. These seem to be a bean species that are really good for saving a little bit of room, and they actually produce a little more than the ones that grow on the vine, I believe. This particular corn is called G90. It came from our local feed store, and I believe that this red coating on the kernels of corn are for helping it grow and maybe protecting it while it's growing, and maybe some nutrients and stuff like that. I really don't know a whole lot about it, but I'm trying some rows of these G90s, and then also I've bought some hybrids, some sweet hybrids. So when you look at the picture on the package, they have some white kernels and some yellow kernels on the cob. So it'll be interesting to see how each one tastes and how different they are. I'm just going maybe 1.5 knuckles deep, and then just loosely patting the soil on top of it. I don't want to go too deep with it because it'll make it hard for them to come up through all of that dirt. And the thing about it is we have tons of squirrels, and you can see over the weeks where they're trying to find these kernels of corn. So today I actually went out and sprinkled some coffee grinds around the perimeter of the garden, because from what I've read, the squirrels don't like the strong bitter smell of coffee. So hopefully that'll keep those little bastards out of my garden. But actually for these kernels of corn, I'm putting them probably 16-18 inches apart, and I'm putting 2 kernels per hole, so that if one doesn't make it, the other one will. And if both of them come up, I'll just pull out the one that is weaker. Alright y'all, that's it for this video. Be sure to stay tuned for more videos in this series, as I will be posting updates on the plants coming up and maybe all the way into harvesting. If you have any questions or comments, concerns, please be sure to leave them down in the comment section. I'd love to hear about maybe even your own garden and your experiences with growing plants. But as always, y'all stay safe. Y'all come back now.